God warned him, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and every time he ignored it. Not because he didn't care, but because he believed he still had time. Until one moment proved him wrong. This isn't just a story, it's a warning.
The birth that changed everything. That night, the world didn't know what was about to happen. No kings were ready. No armies were watching. Just a quiet town, a cold night, and a child born in a place no one expected. But that child would change the course of history forever. Not with power, not with wealth, but with something far more dangerous: truth. And the people who heard it would never be the same again. It began in a time of silence. Not the kind of silence you hear, but the kind you feel. For generations, people had been waiting for a sign, waiting for hope, waiting for something or someone to change everything. The world was heavy, filled with power, control, fear, and questions no one could answer. And then, in a small town called Bethlehem, something impossible happened. A young woman named Mary was chosen for something she didn't fully understand. She wasn't rich, she wasn't powerful, she wasn't someone the world would notice. But sometimes the biggest changes come through the most unexpected people. When she was told she would give birth to a child, not just any child, but someone who would carry a divine purpose, fear mixed with faith.
Because how do you explain something that doesn't make sense to the world? Joseph, the man who stood beside her, faced his own battle: doubt, confusion, fear of judgment. But deep inside, he chose trust, and that choice would place him at the center of one of the greatest stories ever told. As the time came, they traveled to Bethlehem, not for comfort, but because they had no choice. The roads were crowded, the city was full, and when the moment finally arrived, there was no room for them, no place, no shelter, no comfort. So the child who would one day change the world was born in a stable, surrounded not by gold, but by animals, not by kings, but by silence. And yet, something extraordinary happened that night. Far away, shepherds watched over their fields, ordinary men living ordinary lives, until suddenly the sky broke its silence. A light brighter than anything they had ever seen, a presence they couldn't explain. Fear gripped them, but then a voice: "Do not be afraid," because the message wasn't of destruction, it was one of hope.
They were told about the child, where to find him, why he mattered, and without hesitation, they went. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, wise men saw something different: a star. Not just any star, but one that moved, guided, called them forward. They didn't fully understand it, but they followed it anyway. Because sometimes truth doesn't explain itself. It leads you, and you decide whether to follow. Back in Bethlehem, the child lay quietly. No crown, no throne, just a beginning that didn't look like anything special. But history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it begins in silence and grows until the world can no longer ignore it. But not everyone welcomed this beginning, because where there is truth, there is also fear. And where there is fear, there are those who will try to destroy what they don't understand. Far away, a king heard the whispers. A new king had been born, and to him, that wasn't hope, it was a threat. And what he would do next would turn this quiet beginning into something much darker. Because the moment power feels threatened, it doesn't wait, it acts. And the child, who had just entered the world, was about to face danger before he could even speak. A king's fear and a child on the run. Because the moment power feels threatened, it doesn't wait, it reacts, and sometimes it destroys anything that stands in its way. Far from Bethlehem, inside a palace filled with luxury and control, King Herod sat in silence, but not the peaceful kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that hides fear. Because he had heard something he couldn't ignore, a child born to be king, not appointed, not chosen by men, but destined. And to a man like Herod, that wasn't prophecy, that was a threat. The decision that changed everything. Fear has a strange way of thinking. It doesn't ask questions, it doesn't seek truth, it protects itself at any cost. And Herod made a decision, a cold, calculated one. If there is a child who could take my throne, then that child must not live. But the problem was, he didn't know which child it was. So instead of searching for truth, he chose something far darker, a command that would echo through history. A night fear took over. In Bethlehem, the night felt different, still quiet, still calm, but beneath that calm, something was moving, something unseen. Because sometimes danger doesn't arrive loudly, it comes silently until it's too late. And that night, it came. A decree had been sent. Every male child in and around Bethlehem to be taken. No questions, no mercy, just fear turned into action. A world that didn't understand. Families woke up to chaos. Cries filled the air. Confusion turned into horror. Because when power is afraid, innocent people pay the price. And yet, in the middle of all that darkness, there was a small family, unaware that everything was about to change. The warning. That night, Joseph had a dream. Not an ordinary one, not something random, but clear, urgent, unavoidable. A message. Get up, take the child and his mother, and leave, now. No explanation, no delay, just a command. And this time, Joseph didn't question it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't say later, because something inside him knew this wasn't a moment to ignore. The escape. In the middle of the night, they left. No preparation, no goodbyes, just movement. Fast, quiet, urgent.
Mary held the child close. Joseph walked ahead, eyes scanning every shadow. Because when you're running from something you don't fully understand, every sound feels like danger. Every step feels uncertain. But sometimes you don't need to understand the path, you just need to trust it. A strange journey. They didn't stay. They couldn't, because the danger wasn't local anymore. It was intentional. They traveled far, away from everything familiar, toward a place they didn't call home, Egypt, a land unknown, different people, different language, different life. And yet, that's where safety was. Because sometimes protection doesn't look like comfort, it looks like leaving everything behind. The contrast, powerful moment. Back in Bethlehem, the chaos continued, the consequences of fear unfolding in real time. While far away, a child slept peacefully, unaware, protected, guided without even knowing it. Because sometimes you are part of a bigger story before you even understand it. A truth most people miss. That night wasn't just about danger, it was about choices. Herod chose fear, Joseph chose trust. One tried to control the future, the other followed it. And those two choices created two completely different outcomes. because the difference between destruction and protection is often just one decision.
The boy who began to speak, and people started to listen.
Years passed, quietly. No headlines, no miracles the world could see. Just time moving forward. The child who once fled in the night was growing in a land that was never meant to be home. Learning, watching, waiting. Because not every purpose begins with action. Some begin with preparation. Return. One day, the silence broke. The danger that once chased them was gone. And once again, a message came. Not loud, not forced, but clear. It's time to go back. Joseph didn't argue. He had learned something by now. When guidance comes, you follow it. So they returned, not to the same spotlight, but to a quiet place called Nazareth, a simple town, ordinary people, ordinary life. Or at least, that's how it looked. A different kind of child. As the years passed, there was something about him. Not loud, not attention-seeking, but different. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he reacted. While other children chased games, he seemed drawn to something deeper. Questions, meaning, truth. And the strange part was, it didn't feel learned. It felt natural. The moment that changed everything. When he was 12, they traveled to Jerusalem, a place filled with history, faith, tradition. People from everywhere gathered for something greater than themselves. The city was alive, crowded, loud, full of movement. And then something unexpected happened, lost or found. On their way back, Mary and Joseph assumed he was with the group, among relatives, among friends. But hours passed, and something felt wrong. They searched, asked people, looked everywhere, but he wasn't there. Panic slowly turned into fear, because losing a child isn't just fear of absence, it's fear of the unknown, the discovery. Days later, they found him, not lost, not scared, not confused, but sitting inside the temple, surrounded by teachers, men who had spent their entire lives studying, learning, understanding, and yet they were the ones listening to him.
He spoke with clarity, with confidence, with a depth that didn't match his age. Questions were asked, answers were given, and the room felt different. Because sometimes truth doesn't depend on age, it depends on understanding. The conversation. Mary rushed forward, relief, confusion, emotion. All this time we were searching for you, she said. Why would you do this? And for the first time, he responded in a way that revealed something deeper. Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? The words hung in the air, not fully understood, but impossible to ignore. A truth begins to form. That moment wasn't just about being found, it was about being revealed. Not completely, not yet, but enough for people to realize this wasn't ordinary. Something was coming, something bigger than anyone expected. The silent years. After that, life didn't explode into action. There were no crowds, no movements, just quiet growth. Years of patience, learning, understanding people, understanding pain. Because the message he would one day carry wasn't meant to be rushed, it was meant to be lived first. Deep truth, important. Most people think purpose starts when the world sees you, but that's not true. Purpose starts when no one is watching, in silence, in preparation, in the moments that don't look important.
The sacrifice that changed humanity forever.
Because when truth becomes a threat, the world doesn't listen, it reacts. And this time, it was ready to silence him. The betrayal. It didn't come from enemies, it didn't come from strangers, it came from someone close, someone who had walked beside him, listened to him, followed him. Because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from hatred, it comes from trust being broken. And in one quiet moment, everything changed. A decision was made, a price was accepted, and the path towards suffering began. The arrest. Night fell, silence covered the land, but beneath that silence, something was moving. Soldiers arrived, torches lit the darkness, footsteps broke the calm, and there he stood, not running, not hiding, just waiting, because he knew this wasn't the end of his story, this was the purpose of it. The trial. Questions were asked, accusations thrown, voices raised, but truth remained silent, because sometimes when people don't want the truth, no explanation is enough. And slowly, the decision was made, not based on justice, but on pressure, on fear, on control.
The suffering. What followed wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fair. Pain, humiliation, rejection, all at once. And yet, he didn't respond with anger. He didn't fight back. He didn't hate. Because his message was never about power. It was about sacrifice. The moment that shocked everyone. Even in pain, even in suffering, he said something that no one expected. Forgive them because they don't understand. In that moment, everything changed. Because anyone can be strong in power, but to show compassion in pain, that's something else. The final moment. The sky grew heavy, the air still, time slowed, and then silence. The kind that doesn't just fill the air, but fills the heart. Because something had just happened that
ये
the
नया
world didn't fully
सवेरा
understand. It looked like an ending,
एक
but it
नई
wasn't.
उम्मीद
The truth
लेकर
most
आया
people
है.
miss. People thought it was over, that the voice had been silenced, that the story had ended, but they didn't realize something important. Truth doesn't end when it's attacked. It spreads, stronger, deeper, further than before. The real meaning. What looked like loss was actually purpose. What looked like defeat was actually transformation. Because the message was never just about words. It was about action, about showing the world what love really means, what forgiveness really looks like, what sacrifice really costs. Final life lesson, powerful ending. The world will always test truth. It will question it, fight it, try to silence it. But real truth doesn't disappear. It lives in the people who choose to follow it. Because in the end, it's not about who had power, it's about who had purpose. And maybe the real question isn't what happened back then. Maybe the real question is, what are you doing with what you now understand?